Enemies to the east, enemies to the south, enemies to the west, enemies to the north. Enemies everywhere. We're surrounded by traitors.
This year, it's like game on. It's happening. Everything is happening.
You see things on a scale that you don't see on other shows. But for me, it's always the intimate story, the character story, what links these people.
As big as it gets, it's still about these characters and what they're going through.
This season includes such a convergence of storylines.
All these characters who were never together before are now together, and as we get towards the final season, we really feel that everything is converging in a way that's very dramatic.
This is a season, for me, in which it's no longer a Game of Thrones, it's a game of survival.
Traditionally, we'll have a big battle towards the end of the season, and this year, we have battles starting in the second episode.
It all starts now. Winter is here, and it's all hitting the fan from all directions.
Nothing on the show does what you want it to do. Are we all gonna die? I don't know.
Everything for Dany up until this point has been, I've got to get to Westeros, I've got to get to Westeros, I've got to get to Westeros. Well, now she's gotten to Westeros. What do you do now?
On that journey there, she's able to kind of really think through, right, what's my first plan? But she's going into Varys' world, she's going into Tyrion's world, and she needs to know, are they going to be true to her, their new leader, or are they suddenly just gonna get back into old habits?
You served my father, didn't you, Lord Varys?
I did.
You didn't serve him long. You turned against him.
Varys is the one who I think Daenerys has never quite been sure of, because, you know, she maps it out pretty clearly. It's like, well, let's go through it. Let's talk about who you've been serving your entire life. It doesn't bode well. It kind of shows sort of like a fair weather friend.
She needs to make sure that he's on her side. And the same thing with Tyrion. He swore that he would help her defeat his family. She knows he hates his sister. She has no question about that. But now he's going to have to fight his brother and actually destroy his family.
It's incredibly complex being Dany's hand and going and fighting my own family. It was easier when it was Joffrey and Tywin, but now that it's Jaime, it's not so easy of a decision to make. Funny thing about this show is the women have all come to power. You think it's sort of this male-dominated show, but if you look at who's leading the pack, they're women, and that's a pretty fantastic spin on it all.
I don't think there are that many situations in film or television where you see 4 women sitting around a table discussing power and strategy and war. So we thought that was fun and took it out of the realm of your general medieval war council scene, which isn't going to be a bunch of old, grizzled guys with gray beards slamming their fists on a table.
When we were planning that scene out, we were very well aware that it would be a massive ensemble and there'd be a lot of competing agendas. And it made sense to us that Olenna and Ilaria and Yara would be more like the fire-breathing warmongers.
We should hit King's Landing now, hard, with everything we have. The city will fall within a day.
I think everyone in that room has a very strong idea about how to do things. All that Yara's ever done is taken or pillaged, but maybe it's interesting to her to go this way. I don't know. I think she believes in Dany. We all saw that chemistry.
Tyrion's plot of attack is not to attack, really. He wants a solution without everyone dying, because he has a heart. There's all these people who really have no part in these wars, for lack of a better word, civilians.
One of the things that's constraining Dany is that she's a moral person, and she's being advised by a moral person in Tyrion Lannister, and so it would be easy for them to just go and conquer King's Landing. You know, if the 3 dragons fly there and attack, they could burn the city down, and it would take one day, and Dany would rule, and the Lannisters would be defeated. But that also means killing tens of thousands, potentially hundreds of thousands of civilians, and Dany's not willing to do that.
I am not here to be Queen of the Ashes.
Cersei has no moral qualms about doing anything and everything that's necessary to maintain her grip on power. So there are certain strategies that are available to Cersei that aren't available to Dany.
She starts to form her plan, then her game plan.
You invited the Greyjoys to King's Landing.
I invited Euron Greyjoy, the new king of the Iron Islands. I think the Euron connection for her is she sees someone who she can, again, this is Cersei's thing, she's always cleverer than everybody else. She can always manipulate better than anyone else. So she thinks he's equally as ambitious as she is and ruthless, and she can control him and use for exactly what she needs. You know, she has no intention of giving him what he thinks he wants from her.
Euron is a different kind of character that we haven't really had on the show so far. He has goals and has things that he wants, but Euron's way of going about getting the things he wants is a lot more rock and roll.
This is the life.
Y tus
Power is
trailers.
not something that's given to
Visita mi
you.
canal.
It's something you have to take. That's what I like about this character, that he takes what he wants. And you know what? It's always more fun to play a baddie than a good guy.
To have somebody traipse into the throne room and just have so much fun. It was a really fun scene to write, and it was an even more fun scene to watch Pilu bring to life.
I was slightly jealous because I always say to Dan and David, can I just ride one horse, please, and one sword? I'm resigned to a life of chairs and talking. So every time I see anybody doing anything cool, you know, and he comes down the stairs and he's all in leather, and you're like,
I find it very upsetting, you know. He comes in here, he has the coolest looking outfit of all. He looks like a rock star, and he has the funniest lines.
So here I am, with 1,000 ships and 2 good hands.
Euron Greyjoy has built the largest armada in this world, probably the largest armada anyone's ever seen in this world. He's a wild card, but he is a wild card who is naturally aligned with Cersei and Jaime.
He's one of those guys that if he's got a challenge, he needs to take it, and he needs to prove himself. So why not kill your queen's enemy? And we needed a good sea battle in this series, right?
In this show in particular, the sets never cease to amaze me. The amount of work that they put into them, the amount of detailing, you feel like you're on a massive ship.
It's everything, actually, for the actors. If you go into the surroundings and they're there and it's live and it feels organic, then you don't need to do anything as an actor. You just need to be there.
The Silence is a massive warship that needed to be designed for the sequence where Euron hits Yara's boat. And so we designed a big naval ram that was on the front of that boat that would then crash into Yara's. And we had the Corvus itself that could also be this very aggressive thing that then latches onto her ship. The other big thing about Silence was its scale. We wanted to be able to establish a much far superior, bigger boat.
The boat itself doesn't really come into play until it's connected to Yara's ship. And so we decided that the best way to really put across the true size of this boat and still make it possible and functional was to build a section of it, the bow section that rams into Yara's boat.
They only built it like the front of my ship and the side of it. And it was like 5 times bigger than their little tiny boat. You know, it was just this, it was like their boat was this big and mine was this big.
It was such a great, humongous, mean-looking thing. So it just seemed like the personality match with Euron. It was so spot on. It was so right for that character. The challenge beyond that is then to sell the idea that this was happening at sea, and yet we're in a car park in Northern Ireland. But I needed to have water, and Sam's first ever was, well, we'll just blast a load of water against the sides and it will splash up. And it blew me away. I loved it. Then we're going to have fire here, and up on the sails, and fire everywhere, because Sam is obviously a pyromaniac. So there's a lot of elements in there. The whole thing was a dance.
I wanted it to feel like the violence of a riot or football terraces when there's a flash of violence and it just kicks off. Nothing should look choreographed, and that's what we were trying to do with the sea battle. Euron's just a brute. The actor Pilu, who plays him, just relishes in the fighting. It's a fun thing for him to annihilate people.
I have an axe, right? Of course he has an axe. He doesn't fight with a sword, he has an axe. So the first hit I have, and blood just came like... And I was like, yeah, this is awesome.
The key moment, I suppose, for me at least, is trying to achieve a sense of loss and betrayal in that final moment when Yara realizes that her brother is broken and will not come and help her when Euron has the knife to her throat.
I think initially she feels like Theon's back, it's okay, he'll do something, he'll do the right thing. And then the change that happens in his eyes, she realizes that he's not going to stay. I think she's heartbroken at that point that he's done that when they've gone through so much together, and she's made so many attempts to save him.
The laugh Euron gives as he's got his niece and she's crying, it's just, to me, that's the character's encapsulation. That's why this is somebody you should be worried about.
As ruthless as Cersei has been to Tyrion, and as much horrible history as they have with each other, The Cersei that Tyrion left in season 4 is a very different Cersei as well. She's the Cersei that blew up the Sept and took the Iron Throne. And I think she's underestimated by these invaders.
He definitely underestimates Cersei, his sister, and I feel he's guilty of being maybe over too confident because his strategy fails with Casterly Rock.
Jaime has had a long history of failure on the show. This is someone who was supposed to have a very bright military career and future, but he spends most of his time in those initial seasons as a prisoner of war because of his initial failure in season 1, where he's outsmarted by Robb Stark. Jaime learns from that mistake that he made, and he anticipates that Tyrion is going to strike not against King's Landing, but against Casterly Rock.
The siege of Casterly Rock is so much about what doesn't happen, how it goes contrary to expectations. So in order for us to understand that it doesn't play out the way Tyrion expects it to, you really need to hear Tyrion's expectations. So he's kind of narrating us through it.
The gates of Casterly Rock are impregnable. The fight up the walls will be hard. We will be at a disadvantage.
Casterly Rock was a location that we tried to find in many different places. When we were in Spain, we were looking for it the whole time, just like we were looking for Highgarden. And then what we ended up with was right under our noses. And that was our river run set that we used last year. One of the advantages we had was that also because Mark did shoot it last year, he knew what to do to make it look different.
Even though we only see it once this season, it still obviously has to be a living, breathing entity. So with only 40 foot of battlement to actually put live actors on and ladders up against, that was a huge challenge for the visual effects department.
Where are the rest of the Lannisters?
Jaime makes the strategic decision to give up Casterly Rock, to use it as a decoy, to lure the Unsullied over there, to take it, and to get them on the exact wrong side of the continent. And meanwhile, he goes after Highgarden, which is much more valuable because Highgarden's the Tyrell stronghold, which commands all the most fertile regions of Westeros.
When we're in Highgarden, that's a lovely location that they found in Almodovar, Spain. It's a great old castle. There are shots where we see it where Jaime's approaching it. Those were shot completely differently, and we shot a plate of the castle and put it into that scene. And then Alina's look out of her window to see Jaime's forces arrive. Alina was shot on a stage, and of course Jaime's forces were all shot here in Spain. So it is sort of combining a couple different things from a couple different locations.
The taking of Highgarden was structured like that specifically for a visual and tonal variety. Having already seen the taking of Casterly Rock, the writers and I felt that if we were to then repeat another, battle sequence, then we'd basically be repeating the similar beats. The important emotional beat here was to get Jaime and Diana's character, Lady Olenna, into the same room. That was what the real battle was.
Your brother and his new queen thought you would be defending Casterly Rock.
The truth is, Casterly Rock isn't worth much anymore.
It was a ruthless, smart choice by him, which Tyrion later praises.
Abandoned the family home, completely unsentimental. Father would have been proud.
It's nice when Tyrion isn't always right. It's great when these characters make errors, make mistakes, proves them more human.
Enough with the clever plans. I have 3 large dragons. I'm going to fly them to the Red Keep.
When everybody else's plan goes to pot, the only thing to come out is like, I'm going to do this my way. And the way that I do it is to be a dragon.
She wants a victory. She's tired of holding back while Cersei stabs her in the back repeatedly over and over and over again. And she sees an opportunity to take out a large part of Cersei's army without burning down castles, without incinerating villages. And she wins a great victory and destroys much of the Lannister army.
I think one of the pitfalls of this genre is that they're action sequences, which are simply there to be action sequences. This is a character-driven show. Every single scene must be about one of the characters, and we can't stop applying that rule when we get to the action sequences.
When you have a big battle sequence, especially one where you have multiple points of view, you have to figure out how you balance those and whose eyes do you want to primarily tell the story through. I chose to focus on Jaime, that it was about being on the other side of a dragon attack. You have Daenerys Targaryen unleashed for the first time in Westeros, and it's about Jaime Lannister trying to hold together his troops in the middle of watching the world change forever.
Dracarys!
The loot train is certainly bigger than anything we've done up to this season. There's a lot of different beats to the attack. There's Drogon setting lots of things and people on fire. There's the sheer scale of how many Dothraki and how many Lannisters there's supposed to be in this scene.
We have 200 extras, we have 60 or 80 horse people, and it needs to look like a cast of tens of thousands.
We had to alter the environment a little bit just to fit, the 100,000 Dothraki on horses that needed to attack these guys.
As each season comes along, the dragons and the CGI gets more impressive.
To give an idea, in season 6, we had 11 shots that featured Emilia riding the dragon. This year we have over 80. The dragons double in size every year. And the dragons were huge last year, and this year they're twice again. So the dragon buck, which is the practical thing that Emilia sits on, is also twice as big. Environmentally, we're changing the skies, so the overall progression of the scene is, beautiful sunny skies to completely claustrophobic black smoke and ash and dark and, hellish situation.
There's nothing you can do. There's just nothing you can do. So the only thing he does try to do is to take her out.
What gets the heart racing, hopefully in that sequence, is Jaime Lannister grabbing a spear, riding for Dany. He wants to kill her. And you don't want him to. At the same time, you don't want her to turn around and torch him.
This is the first time we've ever had two sets of main characters on opposite sides of the battlefield, and it's impossible to really want any one of them to win and impossible to want any one of them to lose. And Tyrion has the most complex set of emotions about this battle of anyone, because he's got the woman he serves on one end and he's got his brother who he loves on the other end.
Seeing my family lose and his brother Jaime perhaps about to be killed, it's a real struggle for him. Every piece of his being is wishing he can intercede, but he can't.
There was a very slight chance that maybe, just maybe, he could get there in time and kill her. He would die, there's no question about it. He knew that he was not going to survive that.
This whole sequence, you're suddenly like, oh my God, I'm living out these kind of dreams I had as a kid. And it's amazing to be put in this situation and have so much going on with the fire around me. It's like, yeah, don't have to think about acting so much. You're just like, yeah, I'm there.
To see the skill of the stunt guys, of the writers, I mean, what they do in camera is amazing.
And they're performers for a reason. They're really talented at what they do. And they'll have ideas about, oh, this would make this fight better, or this would raise the stakes. The horse department is the same way. Camilla, who's the head of the horse department, she brought some great ideas to us. She said, what about when, as the Dothraki are coming down, if they all just stood up on their horses and started shooting arrows at them? And I thought, well, that sounds great, but that's not possible. She said, no, it is.
We made these little leg frames to put one foot in to enable that, because it's pretty impossible to do without some assistance. So we have these guys standing up. We're endeavoring to try and, create something that somebody hasn't seen before.
This battle was the most fire-intensive one we've had. According to Rally, we set the world record for setting most stuntmen on fire in a single shot, and it looked like it. It was pretty damn impressive to be there on the day watching that happen.
The dragons have grown. They're the size of a 747 now, so they're big. So you'd think then that the amount of people they burn in one go would increase, and there was a few raised out eyebrows when I suggested 20. And it wasn't just because it's a record, although it is. It was because, we just needed to see the scope of what was happening. So that was quite a challenge, and it's not been done before. The most I've done before that was 6. Now 6 seems like a sedate number.
George Martin's often said that the Dothraki are kind of an amalgam of American Indian tribes and the Mongols, who would often fight more traditionally organized armies and make them look foolish because they were just so unorthodox in their battle approach. So definitely got a bit of that Western feel, but then you throw dragons in.
One of the things we wanted to do with the Dragonfire now is to sell how powerful a weapon it is. We've seen younger Drogon burn people, but now he's the size of a 747. The diameter of his dragon breath is 30 feet. And so if you're in the middle of that, you are completely gone in an instant. And that was one thing I wanted to do early on, was to tell the story of the power of that. The special effects department, led by Sam Conway, did a brilliant job of building these charcoal, paper figures that turn into dust the minute that you turn them on fire and blow air at them. And so we have some of that happening throughout the loot train. And then later we see it with the Tarleys.
When you're watching Danny execute the Tarleys, you know, hopefully there would be some argument about what she's done. From her standpoint, she's not acting insane in any way. She's just being tough, which is what she needs to be to win. And that's one perspective. Tyrion has a different perspective, and hopefully people watching it will have their own, and they'll decide for themselves whether they think what she did was just or immoral.
I think this is an argument that the show is continually presenting both sides for. Always, it's asking you, the audience, to question what power means, what it is to have it, what it is to keep it, and how is it best exercised.
It's when his son steps forward and throws himself in with his father. That's really the place where Tyrion's counseling don't destroy the entire future of this house because of the father's decision. And she decides that she can't let him go. It's that really, I think, starts to make Tyrion maybe a little bit uneasy.
Tyrion is most definitely genuinely concerned for Daenerys. From then on, she's questioning my loyalty to her. And I think Tyrion is questioning his own loyalty to her.
I am her hand, not her head. I can't make her decisions for her.
That's what I used to tell myself about her father.
Who's that for?
Jon Snow.
What's it say?
Nothing good.
The letter from Bran says that the army of dead's marching now, and there's no more time. The clock is ticking. So that forces Dany into a decision and Jon into a decision of, what do we do now? We can't sit on this island anymore. Like, the other war is starting, whether we want it to or not.
Like many of these situations on the show, the one who figures it out is Tyrion, you know, which is the only way you're going to prove it to people is to show it to people.
Very often on Thrones, one of the best things is the sets we have around us. And in the Dragon Pit scene, the atmosphere there was just so incredible.
Italica is a phenomenal location. It's not often you would ever get permission to shoot somewhere, you know, where the Romans built and that still has Roman concrete. It's unbelievable. Just as somewhere that you might go as a tourist, it's something that you ought to see when you're in that part of the world, let alone as a film crew, be able to go there and shoot. It was such an enormous honor and something that I'm still quite shocked we were given permission to do. I know for Team Podeswa it was very difficult to shoot.
This is one of the more complex scenes I've ever been asked to shoot. You have almost the entire cast of the show in one place for a very long sequence with very important and very specific beats to capture. You have, like, Cersei seeing Tyrion for the first time in a long time, her mortal enemy. That's a moment. The first time Euron sees Theon, and, you know, what's that moment? So do that times 500. And that's kind of what this scene is. You know, you've got a dragon coming. Many people have never seen a dragon before.
Of course, Dany arrives on a dragon. And she tries desperately to not be impressed by that arrival. And everyone else, obviously, as you would, is standing up in awe of this. And then, you know, in walks this young beauty of a queen, and she's immediately beyond frustrated on many levels. And then all she gets from Dany is apologies.
We've been here for some time.
My apologies.
And that then drives her in the scene. She can't bear it.
It's this quiet, subtle battle of the death stares, really, between the two of us. It's, yeah, it gets kind of intense. And then you have the moment with the White where Daenerys has seen it and she's aware of it and it's frightening, but she is just watching Cersei. Like, she just needs to know that this has affected her so that she can know that we can lay all our cards on the table and believe that when she says that she will have a truce, she means it.
After they see the dead men in the Dragon Pit, Jaime realizes that all of these crazy tales that people have been telling, including his own brother, are true, and that there is a war coming that's threatening everyone. It doesn't matter what side you're on. And he takes Cersei at her word when she says that the Lannisters will fight alongside the North and Dany against this threat. And I think a part of Jaime is even happy to do so. He's always been tagged with the moniker of Kingslayer and a traitor, and he finally gets to be on the right side. and then Cersei takes that away from him.
The Starks and Targaryens have united against us, and you want to fight alongside them. Are you a traitor?
I made a promise.
Jaime leaves, and she never, ever thought that would happen. She sees it as a total betrayal. I just think we leave Cersei ready to roll into season 8, where I just think she's gone.
We don't know what the repercussions of this are going to be, but we know something big is going to happen next season.
Last season, we had a pretty triumphant ending with Dany finally sailing west towards Westeros with her fleet. But this one is definitely much more horrific, and so much of the pressure falls into the laps of our VFX geniuses.
Of course, whatever we can shoot, we did shoot. We have the Night King on a motion base on the back of Visceron. We had a piece of wall fabricated by the special effects and art department teams that we blasted it with a flamethrower that was mounted on a 3D motion control cable cam rig. We shot elements of whites on green screen that will be the basis of the White Army traveling across. We shot tons of plates in Iceland at an environment that replicates the just north of the wall at Eastwatch look. So all of that will come together, and a lot of it is virtual.
For the Ice Dragon, we looked back at the models that we created when Tyrion visited the 2 sick dragons, because we'd gone down a long road of what do the emaciated, starving dragons look like. And they're sick, and they're holding their heads in a different way, and their ribs are poking through the skin. So we started with the season 7 Viserion model and sort of combined it with the season 6 sick Viserion model. And then we did a lot of research on, ice buildup on cars and buses, basically. Where does the snow and the ice build up? And then we transferred that to the dragon because he's obviously flying always in the snowy, icy environment. The hardest, I suppose, would be the collapse of the ice wall. It's so digital, and it has so much particle sim work to do, which must be exactly right, or, the whole sequence fails.
This sequence is a real testament of just the dedication and commitment of that whole team of people working around the world to make something that's impossible and unreal seem so real and so present.
We write, and then the wall comes tumbling down, and it's really easy to type those words, but it's really hard for them to make it look good.
Couldn't think of what would be a greater season finale than the wall falling and the Army of the Dead marching on the living. Since season 1, one of the tropes of the show has always been the wall can hold off the Army of the Dead. So the wall breaking, how could you ever top that?
As a season closer, it's phenomenal. It's like the whole paradigm shift. Okay, the wall is not going to protect you. The enemy is coming. Winter is here. It's snowing in King's Landing. It's like, all right, fur's going to fly. Something's going to happen.
Watching it take shape and come together and seeing how much fun the actors had with it, that's what really thrills me about it. And the characters are going to a place that they never have before. They're facing the conflicts they know will decide their fates, and it's all getting real.
A day in the life of the art department, bro.
I was thrilled when I read the outline and realised there were so many new locations and so many big builds this year. As a member of the art department, you just want to build everything. And I mean, that's what we do and that's what we love.
One of the things that separates Game of Thrones from most other shows is the way it looks. And the way it looks is almost entirely the primary responsibility of Deb and her insanely talented art department.
I'm the first in, apart from the producers themselves.
Debs and myself, we lead a team of art directors, concept artists, assistant art directors, graphic artists. That is the fuel that feeds the construction shop.
The 2 other art directors that we have, they're always first on the ground.
Whatever they throw at us, you have to come up with a creative answer.
You create worlds, you create something that is different from reality.
It's best also to start the concept artists at this point as well.
The construction department will break down into carpentry, plasterers, painters, sculptors, metalwork, rigging department.
And then over the following weeks, everyone else filters back through.
12 beds, ready for the infirmary.
Beautiful.
props will break down into furniture, drapes department, and a painting department.
Beautiful. And this is as it was in previous seasons, isn't it? Nothing.
We also have the greens department who make sure that all of the ground surfaces have been taken care of.
It's a lot of cajoling of a lot of people to make sure that they can kind of do what we want them to do.
This year we're absolutely filled to the gills with people on computers, people on drawing boards, people drafting graphics. It's all happening in a very small space. You just can never let the machine stop. Don't stop the machine for anything. Dragonstone is certainly the piece that I'm most proud of. It's probably the most original work that we've managed to achieve on the show so far.
Dany coming home was a really interesting sequence. What was really lovely about doing it was that doing it for Game of Thrones and doing a sequence like that, you can really do it properly. Like, you can really take your time with it. You can really give it its due as a real moment.
It's about 5 minutes of screen time where no one's talking. It's not like an action sequence where you've got the excitement of people fighting. It's just people walking.
The place itself is really the other main character. It puts a lot of weight on the art department.
We had so many elements that we had to somehow knit together to create the whole Dragonstone world.
Dragonstone this year was a combination of some of the most beautiful locations in Spain you've ever seen.
The arrival is shot in Zumaya. You then get up onto the platform, go up a set of stairs, turn around, and then we're on stage here in Belfast, and those are the massive dragon gates. And then once she goes through those doors here, then you pick her up again in San Juan, where she goes up the steps to the castle. It's like a whole tapestry of locations that we had to knit together to work for Dragonstone. Looking for the space where Dany would land when she would first arrive home, we had to find somewhere that was very special for her. And when we arrived at Zumaya Beach, the geological formations there are so unique and so special and so interesting that they have a weight to them that none of us could ignore.
That leads to these dragon gates that Deb designed that are massive and spectacular.
Our main job for Dragonstone this year has been the exterior of the entrance gate, which is flanked by 2 big dragon head gate guardians that we've carved.
They started sculpting way early, just because something like that is a very time-consuming article to get ready.
The Dragonstone gates, which they built for about 10 seconds of footage, which was huge, like twice the size of double-decker buses on end.
That leads to this raised stairwell that goes over the water and leads all the way up to this monastery where we put Dragonstone. That is such an unusual and incredibly beautiful place.
Here we are, we're on Stage B, Titanic Studios, and this is going to become the Dragonstone. Previously it was marine, all the big marine sets were here, now we're Dragonstone. I think we're 2/3, 3/4 of the way through construction, but we're doing pretty well. It's ambitious, so it was always going to be tight.
Zumaya Beach ended up influencing the design of the interior sets.
We sent a couple of plasterers out to Spain, and we call it a squeeze. What it is, they take an imprint of rock wall, and they'll make a huge rubber impression of that texture. They can bring that back here, and then we can make our own plaster versions. So basically, we're bringing a bit of Spain back with us.
We're at the back of the set, and this is one of the corridors that is running down one side of the main set. We're just building up in various stages here, so we're fixing the set to the location. And these corridors are going to be the areas where Daenerys and Tyrion and everyone are going to be walking up and down to get from A to B once they're in the Dragonstone castle. So here we go, we're going down the tunnel, and we're approaching the entrance to the main hall. And we're going to have a beautiful pair of elaborate gates here, push them open, and then bang, straight into the main audience chamber of Dragonstone. Which is something that is completely different to anything we've seen on Game of Thrones before.
David and Dan were very clear with what they wanted the audience chamber to look like.
A lot of research was done into how the audience chamber would work for the script, how it would look in reality.
I wanted this set to sort of start in the cave and grow out of it. And then we were able to bring in those beautiful geological formations in those side corridors.
That seems so appropriate for Dragonstone, since the castle itself is meant to look a bit like a dragon, you know, and have those sharp edges and scales.
What was really key about the audience chamber, you wanted to come in and you wanted to be impressed, and I also think you wanted to be a little bit terrified. There's something about the entire architecture which is unsettling. It doesn't really seem to be able to support itself, so you're always a little bit anxious and nervous.
They wanted a huge floor space, and there was going to be a few top shots, so the floor had to be interesting, of course. So we tried different shapes of the floor, and we just found the hexagon shape worked really well.
I think there was almost 850 floor tiles to make and create and texture and paint.
We did a seal in the floor as you enter the chamber with a three-headed dragon.
That's probably my single favorite set we've ever built. Without a single visual effect in play, it looked so epic and grandiose and gothic and broody and slightly off-putting in the best way.
This is a former, a basic throne shape. And this afternoon or in the next hour or so, this will go right up here. That will sit right here, dead centre. So Daenerys will be framed with this window. And then behind her, massive great rock formation that goes all the way up into that corner.
It's going to be dramatic.
Yeah, it's really dramatic. Yeah, the angles are fantastic.
The way it was designed, the way the light flows into that room, the throne built out of the rock. It has such a visual impact, that room. I think it's a really special set.
By carving the throne into that rockwork itself, I think makes a very strong statement. It's not a piece of movable furniture. It's something that's tied to the building. It's something that the building was actually built around. And that was something that was really exciting to me.
I'm just so thankful that I have a throne with armrests. Oh, and a back. It's very exciting.
It felt like we were doing something special right from the beginning. So when you watch the crew walk in and when you see their faces, it's enormously satisfying to realize that we got there and it worked.
For decades, House Lannister has been the true power in Westeros, and the seat of that power is Costerly Rock. Grey Worm and the Unsullied will sail for the Rock and take it.
So here we are in the Dragonstone map room. It's slightly changed from the original. A few new improvements. We've made it higher. We've put this header through there so you can shoot up. And we've got a tunnel out the back now so that we've got a direct access out to the castle. There's going to be a lot of dialogue in here this season, so they want it to be lived in. So we've got a fireplace to get a bit of ambient light at night time. But I think the big change is that we designed a new dragon as a sort of logo for the new audience hall. But they liked it so much, they wanted to do the new design on the wall here. So we've taken the old dragon out, and we're now sculpting a new design of a dragon in.
Dany has her map table, and that's been established from going way back to season 2. That's Stannis' map table that was originally built by Aegon Targaryen.
This season, the map markers were made slightly larger than normal. We had this quite cool idea of thinking about World War II maps and how there was the Air Force and how that you'd often have like planes. And so the idea was that the dragons would be higher and have 3 dragons on the table that would be like your Air Force, your Game of Thrones Air Force. And then you'd have your foot soldiers, which would be the Unsullied, and they were designed a bit like pawns, so it kind of became like a cross between a chess set and a war table.
Each map marker was individually thought of and what would visually for the audience be represented. So it was like a clear indication of who was what was where.
We initially would start with a sculpt out of clay, and then it'd be a moulding process and then a clean-up process to refine all of the details. They would then go through to our props painting department, and then they'd be delivered safely onto set and locked in a cage until they were allowed onto the map table.
Gav, who makes all the props, he improved them really. He had to carve them in 3D and I'd done them in 2D. So it's great, it's like a partnership working together. My favourite thing might have been that dragon map marker. I'm really attached to it.
Enemies to the north. Ned Stark's bastard has been named king in the north, and that murdering whore Sansa stands beside him. Enemies everywhere. We're surrounded by traitors. You're in command of the Lannister army now. How do we proceed?
We're talking about places that don't exist, and so we've been trying to educate the audience from the very beginning, because it's so important to know where is King's Landing in relation to Winterfell and so forth. And so much of this season is strategizing between two opposing queens, and Daenerys and Cersei. And we knew that Dany was going to have her map table, and we wanted Cersei to have her equivalent.
We thought that a painted map on the ground next to her council chamber, that seemed like a good idea.
Jim Staines and Rhiannon Fraser, they created a beautiful map for the King's Landing map room. That was a wonderful piece.
The art department, they create this world, and it's extraordinary to play in it.
The first thing I heard about it was, before I even started this year, was there's a map on the floor, and I knew where it was going to be, so I thought, well, okay, big. And then doing a lot of drawing and painting and feeding those into the computer. We had a large print made first, and then we had two guys come in, Dave Packard and Greg Winters, who came in to actually paint the image that I designed.
Visita mi canal.
We knew that Jim Staines, the graphic designer, would create something amazing, and he worked so hard on it, and through many, many different iterations of it. We decided it was only right that the person finishing up the map at the end of the sequence would be Jim Staines. So the man who is firmly but politely dismissed at the beginning of the scene by Jaime Lannister is indeed Jim Staines, who designed and created the map to begin with.
Have you ever been down here, Your Grace?
No, I can't say I have.
We had this incredible location, the old shipyards in Seville. We created a dragon skull room in the basement of King's Landing.
We have to create a feeling that dragon skulls have been stored there, semi-abandoned. It isn't a ritualistic space.
The process of creating the dragon skulls was initially receiving a concept which revealed several dragon skulls of different shapes and sizes, all in kind of relic form.
It was, wanting them to look as much like real skulls as possible. So there's a lot of research that they did into lizard skulls and dinosaur skulls, trying to get all the bone structure just right.
We'll use any artwork that the art department have generated, and we'll use a whole bunch of real-world references as well. For textures, we have a sheep skull to look at how the surface texture looks. We try to basically bring everything back into a reality using reference from the real world. The large dragon skull, that had a digital 3D sculpture done at the art department, and then we took on the task of translating that into a pretty large polystyrene carving.
The sculptors, without a doubt, the best thing that they did this year was that giant dragon's head. To watch that take shape, to see them draw it first, a massive drawing, and then to watch a team of sculptors create that giant thing was really thrilling.
It's about 30 foot long and 11 foot high and about 16 foot wide.
Valerion the Dread, the beast that Aegon rode across the sea. His flames forged the Iron Throne and brought the Seven Kingdoms to heel.
There's a lot of work that goes into it. All in all, there's going to be at least 2 months' work. More if you consider how much drawing an idea and the conceptual, detailed sculpting would have been.
One of the main issues we had was each skull had at least 20, maybe even 30 horns and up to about 70 individual teeth. The workload was quite intense, really.
We'll cut it up and send it on lorries to Spain and reassemble it on the location.
The sculptors who've made them here in Belfast would travel out to Seville and get to fix them back together again.
The finishing work, the attaching the horns, which were sent separately, they were all attached within that skull room.
There must have been 50 dragon skulls down there of all different sizes and different states of disrepair.
The scale was from sort of handheld size skulls up to, with the horns on, up to about 10 feet in length.
While they were making the skulls, we ordered crates up from construction, then we crated them up. But the crates were quite useful as well, because we needed more dressing for the skull room than we thought. So the crates, which were intended just for shipping, ended up broken down, repainted, stenciled and dressed in. So that was quite handy.
I think many people, when they watch it, will think it's a visual effect, but it wasn't. Like, we literally had that big a place with that many skulls.
I think it's one of the most successful spaces that we've ever worked in.
One of the biggest sequences in this show to grapple with was the sequence in the Dragon Pit.
With the dragon pit, basically, it started with the location that they had found, the Italica Colosseum.
Italica was a city built, I believe, as of the beginning of the 2nd century. And this amphitheater, I believe, held up to 40,000 people for games. Right now, what we see, the ruins of it, I think they're more or less 25% of what it used to be.
It's not often you would ever get permission to shoot somewhere where the Romans built that still has Roman concrete. It's unbelievable.
The fact that they've managed to find it, get access to it, and then dress it in a way that serves the story, it's remarkable.
When you read the scene, you try and imagine a place for it, and then you see the photos of the location, you think, gosh, this place exists. It really felt like dragons had been there. We had a lot to work with. We were really adding in small sections of construction to tell our story that it was an abandoned space and that it had served a different purpose in the past. We built a platform and a podium for this very powerful scene that was going to take place there.
We were very much involved in the canopies and then the choice of fabric that we used. Because it was King's Landing, we wanted to use the deep burgundy red of the Lannisters. So we created 3 different platforms, and then the hero platform had a fabulous damask pattern and had more detailing on the columns. The chairs that Cersei actually sat on were like lovely leather embossed chairs with arms that had a bit more stature.
We had to fill in the pit where the animals were kept and the gladiators would wait before the fights in Roman times. The existing Roman architecture, we weren't allowed to touch it at all with our set. So logistically, building a structure on top of that, it took quite a lot of time, and it was very closely supervised by archaeologists that worked at the site.
What I loved about the space and what I fought really hard for was to be able to have the hound with the white come up from below. Cersei enters at ground level and Dany enters on her dragon from above, so that you understand the way the space works very clearly. When she arrives on that dragon, I mean, that's an amazing moment in the history of the show. That needed, you know, the appropriate sort of space for that to happen.
Bernie and our location gang in Spain had found Almodovar Castle, which seemed like a perfect match for Highgarden.
This year, we've had quite a variety of amazing locations. We've had 2 different castles, one which was standing in for King's Landing at Trujillo, and then the one that was Highgarden, which was Almodovar.
We knew it before we even arrived, that this was Highgarden. We arrived at the gates of Highgarden that day.
We've been hearing about Highgarden for quite a few seasons now, and you try and imagine where you'll find a place that will fulfill those expectations, and here was this really beautiful castle, literally with a garden that was high up, an amazing, amazing setting.
The morning we shot there, we came up at sunrise, and there was a mist across the fields there that was just magical. It was Tolkien-esque, it was extraordinary.
There were things to do there. A lot of our work has generally been taking away anything that's modern and build things to disguise the things that we couldn't safely remove.
From an art department point of view, there was obviously a lot of handrails that needed to be removed. Greens did a lot of work.
Hopefully, it's largely invisible work from the construction point of view. And then the set dressing, adding in all of the chests and the gold, telling the story that way. A lot of things that went into that location.
You have the big courtyard scene where you see the Lannisters going through and looting the place. And so we had some bullion that was made here by our modelling department with the Tyrrell roses on them.
Manufacturing the ingots individually was a process in itself, and then obviously getting those gold-plated was quite labour-intensive.
We wanted to establish a certain amount of wealth that they had, that there was obviously something that Jaime would be interested in, you know, that the Lannisters would be removing and taking for themselves. So when you see that wagon train heading out of there, you know that they've completely cleaned the place out. The chamber where Jaime finds Olenna waiting for him, that was built in Belfast. There wasn't a room that was big enough to be shot in, that had enough sort of crew access, that allowed the camera the space that we needed there on location.
Will there be pain?
No, I made sure of that.
That's good.
My name is Samuel Tarley, sworn brother of the Night's Watch, training to serve as maester at Castle Black. I knew your father. I was with him when he died. You're not dying today, Sir Jorah.
Not many things can really get hired anymore from prop stores for this show. Everything's kind of designed very bespoke, whether it be a surgical instrument or a piece of furniture.
If we need to make 12 beds, for instance, for like the infirmary in the Citadel, they'll get concepted and then they'll get made and everything gets researched. What fabrics we'll use and materials.
Within the Citadel, we also had a lot of surgical instruments to make from scratch.
Something like Sam's medical instruments, David and Dan, again, were very specific about what they wanted. And then it started with Jess Sinclair, and she was there doing the concept art for these instruments.
First, do quite a lot of research to look at like most early forms of surgery. Looking at a lot of things from the plague was good, useful. And then also bearing in mind that Game of Thrones is often quite bloody, and David and Dan like quite gory things. So then you might up the drama to make it more so it'll fit.
It's that cross between sort of medieval, sort of, you know, we're in that sort of medievalish world, but at the same time, you know, we're in the Citadel, and what does that mean, and what sort of instruments would Sam use to operate on Jorah? Gavin, our props maker, he made all of those beautiful instruments that then get handed on to Kevin, and he ages them all. They then all get handed to Gordy, and then he keeps them all and is responsible for them, and he's made a lovely little pouch for them that is also part of the scene.
We wanted a look on them. I mean, they wanted to look sort of nasty and kind of, it's like, you know, you don't want anyone coming near you with those objects.
They have to look appropriate to that period, but yet at the same time look real and convincing, as if you could perform an operation with them.
So those all had to be designed, all had to be made in-house, purely because they didn't exist. The things you would have found wouldn't have been nearly as interesting as the things we were able to dream up.
Hey, up. Where are you going?
In there. I live here.
Fuck off.
I'm Arya Stark. This is my home.
Walking into Winterfell for the first time, seeing this extraordinary exterior set, I feel a little bit like a neophyte, because I just assumed Winterfell was a real castle, you know? And so I walk into this set, and it's just extraordinary. I know from the pilot it was a real castle, and I guess I just kind of assumed that part of it was still shot. And no, they built this thing, and they made it bigger this year.
The art department this year have just done the most incredible job. The Winterfell set that I'm in at the moment is just completely built from scaffolding.
Every year, we get to see a little bit more because we add on courtyards, and we add on catwalks, and we add on interior spaces that give you a sense of what's going on inside these keeps with the corridors and the hallways and the different rooms of the castle.
This is Winterfell Gate. That's the front entrance to Winterfell. As you can see, there's quite a bit of damage that has occurred over the past winter. These sets were not designed initially to last 7 seasons. It's all plaster work and timber at the end of the day that we construct sets of. They're not real. And as a result, there's always maintenance to be had. Out here is mainly kind of paint work, but when you go inside, you'll see there's a lot more to be done. Obviously, we've had the Winterfell battle last season. One breaking through the gate. These are kind of the remnants of that action. We've put the original panels back because we want to show that they are preparing for the coming winter and for coming battles. This is obviously is completely bare. There are no props in here. The greens will have to come. They will have to take a lot of the greenery out. We'll need to relay the floor a little bit. This is all weather. The floor is suddenly kind of quite uneven. It's just rain damage. So now we're in the second courtyard. Again, you know, quite a bit of damage. The steps have all collapsed. It's not that bad, actually. It's still in very, very good condition. The guys just need to replace a few of the boards on the walkway. But overall, it needs a really good repaint. In addition to the original courtyard from season 1, we built a second courtyard for last season, to which we have added a third courtyard this season. Deborah Riley, our designer, designs the sets. We then take these designs and work them into practical working drawings and then supervise the builds as well. These are obviously not the canals anymore as such. We are putting a window at the end here in order to kind of ring the changes. It can bring us from the second courtyard into our new build, which is our new courtyard.
These are Mother and Father's chambers.
And? This year, obviously, we have more characters in Winterfell, areas coming back. Sansa, and of course Jon Snow. As a result, each of them have a room. Bran has a room. Suddenly, instead of having 2 rooms, you need 4. Then also there's a lot of action in corridors. There's a lot of intrigue going on where people are following people. So, you know, all of that needed developing. This is Jon Snow's room, which used to be Ramsay's room. We've kind of rebuilt this slightly. There's a window here now. We've changed things around. We've changed the fireplace just to kind of do this a little bit differently. As you kind of find your way through, you'll find your way into Sansa's room, and from there, kind of all the other rooms as well. So this is Sansa's room here. Everywhere still some construction to be done.
Tráilers.
You know, the
Visita
fireplace
mi
is still
canal.
being built. There are certain things that can probably kind of do with a little bit more. This hasn't been finished yet. Whilst this has, they started taking this down, aging this.
What's that?
Maester Welkin built it for me, so I can move around more easily.
It's a very good idea.
I have designed a lot of stuff for Bran Stark. He doesn't know it, but I'm his personal transport designer.
There was a lot of opinions on how it should look and how it should feel, and the concept artist went through numerous designs before that was actually approved for us to then make.
Now he's the three-eyed raven. He has quite an austere character, so you had to not design any decoration on it, and it had to be the Winterfell colours, quite pared down, and then using the wood and the leather, keeping it really simple, so it reflected his character.
It has to be practical, but it has to look period. So the trick is to kind of disguise the mechanics of it at times. Once it was done, everybody was happy with it, and it was comfortable also for the actor and was able to function properly.
The North needs to band together.
The Winterfell fire backplate, it's the second one we've made over the last 2 years. If it was something that you could just have hanging at the back of a set, there wouldn't be that much of a problem, but because you want to light a real fire in front of it, we have to use special fire retardant materials. We then have to generate a huge mold, which is very expensive, very labor intensive. A prop like that is something that doesn't really get much camera time, but it's just all part of the process.
One of the great things about having a show that's gone on for many years, for all the departments, there's a degree of accretion where you just keep adding layer and layer and layer, and things become more rich and complicated and lived in. And that all adds to the realism of the world.
They have done such an extraordinary job. All of these sets are bigger than you can imagine and more detailed than you can really even experience frame by frame in a show. It's quite an adventure.
Silence was one of the early sets, and it had to be one of the WoW sets, which it was. We had to create that really actually in about 7 weeks. Because we didn't have a lot of time, everything just had to go perfect on that.
We're in Banbridge doing the boats for the sea battle. Yara's ship and Euron's boat, the Silence.
Halka Richter was the art director of that set, and he was working with a concept artist named Philip Shearer.
The Silence was my favorite and my least favorite set at the same time. It was quite obvious that everyone's vision was very, very different. Someone imagined the ship to be like Chinese influenced, but these are also Ironborn. So some others were looking more like in a Viking direction. To bring all of this together was like the big challenge.
Through research, we started to look at Roman sort of biremes, triremes. We were looking at medieval ships.
The boat's an amalgam of a lot of different great warcraft that were built over the different centuries, so it's not quite like any one in particular, but it's a lot of different ones mushed together.
As we planned the battle out, we realized the boat itself doesn't really come into play as a real thing that people need to interact with until it's connected to Yara's ship. So we decided that the best way to put across the true size of this boat and still make it possible and functional was to build a section of it, the bow section that rams into Yara's boat.
The art department designed and built the first 50 feet of the Silence with the idea that visual effects would then extend that.
The great thing was, because Philip had worked in 3D on the computer when he was designing it, it meant that these ribs could then be farmed out and cut and perfectly delivered so that the boat would go together like it was out of a kit.
When the thing is then assembled, you get the skeletal structure of the ship, and then we just start to clad it. So it was very much a carpentry-heavy set. We have marine guys who will come over and help us on these things. All the rigging came through them. They'll splice the ropes, they'll hang the ropes, put the sails up, do whatever they can to get this car park ship ready for battle.
I work out the drawing to scale everything down to make the sail the shape it is. Then we ordered the fabric, which is now is a black acrylic canvas because it's got to be strong. There's also the special effects sail, then that's put up on the ship as well, so they can work out all the details in special effects.
If you look at Roman or Greek ships, they often had animal designs in front. Euron obviously has a kraken as a sigil. It kind of befits the character, and it makes the ship look so much different from any of the other ships that we've had before.
Being on that boat, my boat, they only built it like the front of my ship and the side of it, and it was like 5 times bigger than their little tiny boat.
Looking at it from the outside, it's quite extraordinary. It's so exciting to just be in the presence of something that's so well designed.
Tus tráilers.
Perfect.
Visita mi canal.
The Silence is Euron's mothership, and it's supposed to intimidate people when they see it, and it's supposed to strike fear into the hearts of his enemies.
Euron.
We are on the top deck. We wanted to make it look more like a fighting deck, so, you know, that's why the castellations, the idea that it's almost like a mini castle on a deck.
We fell in love with this idea of a thing called a corvus, which is a kind of like a bridge.
It was a device that the Romans used to enter an enemy ship. So they would lower the corvus, which had a spike that looked a little bit like the beak of a raven. That's why it was called corvus. Corvus is Latin for raven. It would literally sink itself into the deck of the enemy ship.
And the guys come streaming down and then run onto the ships to murder everybody.
We were such a great, humongous, mean-looking thing, so it just seemed like the personality match with Pilu's rendition of Euron.
It is quite clearly a warship. It doesn't transport people. It transports death and destruction.
The loot train is our biggest scene this year by far.
The loot train involves a lot of different departments, all sort of working at the very extremes of their abilities.
We're in a park called Los Barracas, which is a natural park here in Extremadura region of Spain. What drew us here originally was the strange rock formations, which are quite unusual.
Barracas was probably the last location we found because it was at the end of our 2 weeks tour. At the end of 6,000 kilometers in a van, we finally found it.
What we were looking for location-wise was just basically the biggest field we could find. It had to have some water on it because there's the river comes into play, but really we just needed a massive field because we're going to have the Dothraki galloping in. We've got a massive Lannister wagon train. We've got the dragon flying. You need a ton of space.
When I first read the outline, I did think it'll be exciting to be doing a battle, but there'll obviously be nothing for the art department to do because we have an amazing location and we'll put some wagons in and we'll set fire to them. And how wrong I was.
We initially received concepts of about 5 medieval-style armoured vehicles in horse and cart form. Then we hired 5 carts from England. We then had to sort of dismantle those carts, modify them in a way to work precisely with the concepts.
Everybody in Spain then did the actual set dressing that was associated with them.
One cart in particular, which we would call the hero cart, we had to work very closely with the director of photography along with the set decorator, as this cart needed to be lengthened so that certain camera angles could be established.
From a greens point of view, I think it's possibly one of the biggest sets that we've tackled.
It needed to look very lush and green before the battle actually commenced, so we sort of looked after that, and we did a lot of clearing. We've got lots of rock piles, artificial rocks that look very, very much like the ones that you see around you now.
You have horses charging down the side of the hill, so we have to take everything out. Stones, bushes, anything that could hurt the horses or the riders.
Usually on a sequence of this scale, we would take the back foot, it might just be blood puddles or a handful of things, but because the entire sequence is a wagon train and involves 27 wagons and there are various bits of dressing, we have to reshuffle the entire set constantly, which means dressing 180 degrees or 360 depending on the camera movement.
We are providing all of the objects that are dressing the set, so the wagons, the things in the wagons, the urns, the pots, the dead animals. As a painter, we sort of age them and make them feel like they fit into the environment. And I think it's good that maybe when you're watching it, it doesn't necessarily stand out, and that means we've done our job.
It started off a big loot train and everything was intact, and then the dragon comes along and blows it all to smithereens. There's different stages throughout the 3 weeks that we're shooting, so we have a whole team of dressers that come and do the changes.
As this set's sort of gone further and further into the battle, and you know, dragons have been and fires happen, and now what we're doing is we're making it look very charred and burnt, and lots of sort of crispy critters hiding everywhere.
There's a lot of continuity to make sure that we're in the right space, in the right part of the process, reflecting the right amount of burn, the right amount of damage. How you keep that going takes an awful lot of effort.
We have an eco-friendly dye which dyes things black to make it look very charred and burnt, and we're using several forms of ash as well to dress in and make it all look authentic, along with charcoal and stuff like that.
It's a big special effects bonanza. Everything that we provide will then have to be burnt over a matter of 3 weeks. So we're building carriages, we're building wagons, knowing that everything is going to end up as ash by the end of it.
This is going to be crazy. It's a big battle. There's lots going on. We've got crew doing lots of different things here. There's hundreds of extras and horses and fire. I knew it was going to be crazy and fun too.
The frozen lake sequence is so ambitious that I don't think any of us really understood what we were getting ourselves into. Bernie Caulfield and Chris Newman pushed to have it in this quarry, which is half an hour outside of Belfast. It's called Wolf Hill Quarry.
I remember we went there and it was actually a nice day. What we didn't realise was how bad the weather was going to get.
Start clearing out, please. Let's go. All the rain comes, heavy again.
Wolf Hill Quarry can be a very unforgiving environment, weather-wise, a lot more brutal, especially in November, December, than the places we shot in Iceland.
It's worth it to get those characters out there where it really is freezing cold. What you'll see on camera is exactly what it is. It will be a very raw, cold, freezing environment where these characters are utterly exposed to the elements.
We looked at the location and then it was like figuring out how you can create a frozen lake.
We worked with some engineering contractors. These guys came in with big machinery. We've done a lot of quarry work, and I know that one man with some of those big machines can shift an awful lot of earth in a day.
It has to have a flat surface. Ice forms in flat pools. It doesn't have a hill. So we had to concrete it so it was a hard surface, so no mud could leach into the fake snow and so on.
In the end, we put down 11,000 square metres in area of concrete, which is nearly 3 acres, to create that vast area of frozen lake.
When you stand up on the top and look down, it was like we were building an airport or something. It looked amazing. And I'm sure the people up in the International Space Station must have been thinking, what on earth are they doing there? Like, it was, the scale of it is enormous. We built the island in the middle like we would build a set.
The island was built out of a mixture of real rock and then plaster work to actually get the shape correct.
The island in the middle had to be very specific to contain the action. So we had the area where Tormund is, where the Hound is, where Jon Snow is. You know, those areas all had to be kind of worked out.
Where we need a place for Jon Snow to fall down, so we need a little step in the rock structure.
And the same really for the Night King area. Deb wanted it to have a real dynamic to it, so we used our own plaster, fiberglass sheeted rocks, but they were done in such a way to give the thing a drive. It's moving forward, this thing. It feels present.
When I came to set for the first time and saw this lake, I understood it was concrete and that they had actually made it. That blew my mind.
That island they built in the middle of the lake, it looks like a real island, you know, and the way they've made the lake look iced over. Yeah, it's incredible.
And then, of course, you know, you can't talk about that set without acknowledging the snow team. They've been there for an inordinate amount of time, just snowing piece by piece by piece, so that what you end up with is very nearly a 360-degree set.
We try to shoot in quarries whenever possible because they're just massive open spaces that we can turn into our playgrounds for whatever we need.
We built some walls to take us from Iceland into this lake to sort of make believe that we were in the same environment.
When you film something in another location and then you're responsible for finishing that location off somewhere else, you know, you have to really do your homework and try and make sure that you match it as best you can. And so all I can hope now is that the conditions that they have in Iceland when they shoot the first part match the conditions that we had when we shot in the quarry.
For the frozen lake, we initially received a concept where numerous White Walkers were pulling a huge dragon out of the lake. This was going to be a very visual effect heavy scene, but still we knew that, you know, the actors required to appear to be pulling something heavy.
We created like quite a large chain. It was all about figuring out the size of the links and how we'd get enough tension on it.
We needed to manufacture almost 400 feet of chain, which I think was about 1,000 links in total.
And then they were all painted with like a rust finish, and they'll actually get snow on the day up there.
I can't believe the scale of this thing. This is an hour of television. I started in September. I won't be done until February. That's nuts. Game of Thrones.
When I go up there now and I see them filming, it's like, wow, did we really do that? You know, I still sometimes have to pinch myself.
Okay, let's go for it. Here we go. We're rolling. Set. We're set. And action.
We have a fantastical storyline which requires us to suspend our disbelief. And what the art department does in these sets is it makes it real.
The art department is this show. It's just such a major factor in why this show has worked.
Nothing happens here without us taking the time to discuss it and to really think about it. I hope the audience understand and enjoy that, because it's something that we take great pride in.
That's why we do win Emmys, because we obsess over a scroll that's in the back of shot and is totally out of focus.
Pretty much everything that you see on set is created by the art department.
It's great to see your work being appreciated, but I would say conversely that a lot of our work is invisible, and it should be invisible.
If I was the 5-year-old version of me and I found out what I'd be going to be doing, I'd be like over the moon. This is cool. It's like playing.
We're just creating worlds. That's great. Can't really get anything better than that.
The sets are so authentic that you feel yourself step into another world.
When you walk on a set that you've concepted, it's a very surreal, exciting experience.
I actually can't believe I have the job I have. It's fantastic.
Well, they're just all so real. Everything from the weapons to the dressing of the set. It's absolutely nuts. If I wasn't an actor, I'd work in the art department.
Working in the art department is like an extreme sport. It's a very intense environment where a lot of things are happening very, very quickly.
I don't know how Deb sleeps because she had so much work to do this season, and she'll have so much work for the final season that it's kind of incredible she's still cheerful when you see her.